It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
All right, this first question is from Chris. And this is a good one right now. So Chris said, hey, with inflation running rampant, do you have any suggestions for keeping pace? So obviously, we even talked about on the show where we covered housing, about how housing prices are increasing. It seems like inflation is a thing that's coming, or if it's not here yet, it potentially could be coming. Are there ways we should think about it when it comes to our wealth building journey and how we make decisions?
Oh, for sure. I mean, Chris, by the way, great question. And this is one of those things where you have to think about what is actually going on. What's the cause? Are there distortions? Are there arbitrage situations? And this is just my own personal take on this, is that I've noticed, and there's all kind of, they showed where the 10-year Treasury has been versus where actual rates are and what and inflation. That's what they compared inflation with the 10-year Treasury. And there's been a huge separation because when you overlaid this historically, there was some correlation. Mm-hmm. You look at, but you can when you see that now that 10-year Treasury is not budging, it's going up slightly. But meanwhile, inflation's 6, 7, 8%, depending upon 40% if you're talking about fuel. And then you see the 10-year Treasury is still bopping around to 1.5 to 1.6%. You're like, something's off. It's because it's being manipulated. Mm-hmm. I mean, without a doubt, our government and the central bankers have every incentive to keep interest rates low because they're in debt up to their eyeballs. So they're manipulating the interest rates to be extremely low. So that's the first thing to pay attention to. Meanwhile, we have all this money floating around out there in the economy. That is causing, because you have all this money floating around there, there's demand for goods, but we also realize when we shut down the government, the economy because of lockdowns and so forth, that engine of operation doesn't just crank right back up. So there's been a lot of labor issues, there's been supply chain issues. So here's my guidance. We know that inflation, they call it transitory. I don't think it's going away. I'm not so sure because I was talking to a neighbor. Their company does something with cabinets and housing, and they said, hey, we raised prices 15, 20% because truthfully there were supply chain issues. We got those issues fixed, but there's still so much demand. We're keeping prices up. So I'm not so sure people are going to put the genie back in the bottle. I think since prices have gone up, there's plenty of demand in the marketplace. Prices will stay up. So you have to start thinking about, what does this mean for my wallet? What does this mean for my decision making? The first general statement is it's good to own stuff.
That's right.
So when I say it's good to own stuff, I'm talking about real estate, of course, is going to do incredibly well, especially and look, I'm not a big debt fan. I don't love debt, but there is an arbitrage situation in the fact that they will let you buy highly appreciating assets like real estate with very small interest rates, because interest rates are artificially low right now. That does create an opportunity. But in addition to traditional things like real estate, the stocks that you own are also going to be something that's going to be very effective in the long term. Yes, they're going to have hiccups as companies are trying to figure out the pricing. Just like that cabinet company I mentioned, they had a hiccup initially because of supply chain issues, but now that they've raised prices and they fixed the supply chain, do you know what that extra, cost is going to? It's actually profit.
It's profit.
It's now falling to the bottom side of the income statement as profit, and there's no need for them to lower it because there's still tremendous demand for the cabinets they're making. You're seeing this all around the world on vehicles, appliances. So owning the companies that make that stuff, or owning the S&P 500, owning index funds is going to be able to capitalize on those things as well. That's the way I'm approaching this thing. I think it's good to own things in this economy because as inflation hits, everything you own is going to appreciate. But it's also understand healthy leverage. I'm not saying go out there and over leverage, but understanding that we have a situation where debt is so cheap, it is pushing people further out on the risk spectrum. And then with all that guidance, I'm going to say one more big thing over here. And this is probably, I hope I'm not stealing this from Bo. You better have plenty of cash. And I know cash earns nothing right now, but if you're doing things like that arbitrage with low interest and buying real estate with it and other things, make sure your pockets are deep enough that you can weather any type of market volatility that might come. That if all of a sudden the economy got beat up and you weren't collecting rent that month, or for 3 months or 4 months or even 6 months, you would be okay. That's the mistake people make with leveraged assets is they get into them, but they get into them skinny dipping naked. And then when the tide goes out because you didn't have cash to cover out any shortfalls or anything else, you find yourself in a pickle of a situation. So pay attention to those things. I'm okay with, like I said, healthy leverage is okay as long as you're carrying around big pockets in the background to get you through whatever's coming.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that, and it's very much in line with that last thing you said, is maybe you're not someone out there trying to buy real estate or trying to go take on leverage, but you said, man, inflation is coming and maybe interest rates are rising. Don't allow that to be something that moves you too far out on the risk spectrum.
That's great.
Where you say, you know what, oh no, I need to own assets, I need to own businesses, I need to own companies. So instead of being in a 60-40 portfolio that makes sense for me, I'm going to go to a 90-10. Because here's what we don't know. We don't know when the next downturn is going to happen. We don't know what the market's going to do. We don't know how long the bull market is going to last. We don't know when the next bear market's going to start. We don't know how bad it's going to be. We don't know how long it's going to take to come out of it. When you don't know those things, you want to make sure that you're not caught naked. Because when you're skinny dipping naked and the tide goes out, that's when everybody sees that you were skinny dipping and you get yourself into a bad spot. So don't let your inflationary concerns cause you to go too far out on the risk spectrum because you may be creating another problem by trying to solve that problem. Because I think a lot of people have been asking me that. And there's a reason you hold cash in your portfolio. There's a reason you hold risk-off assets in your portfolio. There's a reason you hold bonds in your portfolio. Don't lose sight of that. Just make sure you're doing it in a way that makes sense given the current environment that we're in.